So to begin, let's talk about college. What made you decide to major in environmental science?
Well, my experience came out of my life as a swimmer. I was involved in the Deaf Olympics and swam for many years. My father was a professor of economics, and we moved to Annapolis, Maryland at one point, and we got a house that was right on a creek. However, 2 summers in a row, we weren't allowed to swim in the creek because of the level of pollution, and that had a huge impact on me. I had a passion to do something about that. So my goal was to go to college and either be a lawyer to change the situation or to be an environmental scientist to change the situation. And it just so happened that the year that I went into Harvard, they had a brand new major that combined both of those, so it was perfect for me. Afterwards, some of my classmates went on to advanced studies in public policy. Some went on to advanced studies in environmental sciences. Around that same time, you may have seen Al Gore's presentation that he presented across the United States called An Inconvenient Truth that later became a movie. That also had an impact on me. Al Gore had been a senator for many years, working hard to try to make changes in environmental law and impact the situation. And progress was slow, frankly. And, at that point, there were people who were scientists who were working on the problem and people who were in public policy working on the problem, but they weren't talking to each other. They were two divergent communities, basically. And what I wanted to see happen is to be some kind of bridge between those two communities. So the Harvard program at that point was perfect for me because it did just that. I was 5 years in that major, and like I said, some of my classmates went on to public policy, some went on to other science majors, but it was interesting to see how the joining of those two disciplines impacted all of us.
Wow, that is interesting. So there were two factors, basically. Whatever happened to the creek?
Well, it was an interesting story. Later, we realized that the situation with the creek was one where most of the pollution was either caused by sewage being dumped or pollution from motorized watercraft.
Sure.
Yeah, so there were a number of factors that led to that pollution, but it was so disappointing as a kid to walk out to the end of our dock and not be able to get in the water. And I just said, this can't be right. I have to do something about this. And it's actually illegal to swim in the Anacostia River now, and the boats are allowed, but people are not allowed to get in the water physically.
Really? I mean, what happens if somebody falls out of the boat?
I know it's ironic that you can put boats on, but you can't actually get in, and I certainly would be careful not to let my boat tip over and end up in that water, because when I was out doing my field work, I saw dead cats in that water. I mean, I would not want to fall in. It's very polluted.
Yeah, you'd want to avoid that for sure.
Well, what I want to do is improve the situation. That's what I really want to do.
Good point. So you're talking about environmental science and public policy. What courses were the most difficult for you and the most challenging, and why?
No doubt, organic chemistry. I mean, again, and that course is a course that weeds out the scientists from the non-scientists, and for many disciplines, not just in my field. So it's actually, everyone says, ugh, organic chemistry. No one likes it. But at the same time, there are basic components of that class that are one of the foundations of work that comes after that. And so a lot of people go on to medical school after that, and if they don't get an A, it's not just passing the class, but getting an A, they don't get into medical school. So after that, I went on to other courses where I actually got to do, chemical biology, which I loved. The other course that was really difficult for me was physics. I had a really cool physics professor, Eric Mazur, who was instrumental in developing the real-time classroom questionnaire response system. That's where every student clicks their response to a multiple choice question, and then after everyone responds, it shows the correct answer. Of course, today everyone has those systems, but at the time it was brand new. So students got instant feedback, which really helps. Organic chemistry and physics were the tough ones for me.
Yeah, I know. I took a course here in organic chemistry, it was the same type of thing that I went through. I mean, it was a tough, tough course.
One thing that I'll tell you is when you get into graduate school, into biology, you have to take physical oceanography in my field. And by the time I got to that, I just felt like saying thank you, because it was the frustration that I had gone through previously. It was very tough, but I found that there was a lot of application when I got to the physical oceanography. So the frustration has its rewards in the end.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. So, next question. You attended 3 different colleges and got 3 different degrees. And you have a very, very diverse educational background. The University of Washington, Harvard. What made you pick these different colleges? Why was that?
Well, how I picked Harvard was a long story, but I'll try to tell you the short version of it here.
No, no, please.
Oh, well, actually, honestly, I didn't want to go to Harvard, but the way the process happened was interesting. I applied to what I felt were the best schools. So, and then I applied to some schools that I thought were safe schools, and then I applied to my parents' alma mater, and and to the University of Maryland. Now, I'm a swimmer, like I said, so the swim team at each college was an issue for me, and some of the schools were Division II, not Division III, and I sent out applications to Harvard, Brown, and Princeton. And that went very well. I also went for a visit to Yale. And then my parents had both gone to very small colleges and were supportive of the concept of the small college. My mother had gone to Mount Holyoke and my dad to Amherst. And both of those colleges are, women's and men's colleges in the same town. So the suggestion was made that they threw out was Wesleyan College, because it's a small college similar to the ones that they went to. And then I also applied to Georgetown and to Gallaudet, because a lot of deaf friends were there. And the things I was looking at was deaf community, good academics, and a good swim team. Those were my 3 criteria for a school. So I sent out 8 applications altogether to 8 different colleges, and I thought that the rejections would help me narrow it down. The problem was I got accepted at 7 out of the 8 schools, so that left me with a little bit of a dilemma. So how I proceeded at that point was to just throw out the safe schools, because I didn't need to be safe anymore. Then from the schools that were left, like I said, I'm a swimmer, so I went on a trip to each of the schools and visited the swim team. And it was really nice because I spent the whole weekend with the swim team, got to really know people, really had an in-depth visit with people there. So when I went to Princeton, it was like I was invisible the whole weekend. No one spoke to me all weekend. And finally, one swimmer said to me, "Wow, you're really quiet." And I thought to myself, well, because no one talked to me. So if no one's going to talk to me, that's not the school for me, obviously. So that eliminated that school. And then when I went to Harvard, it was a very different experience because it's a really diverse student population there. And, I also Princeton, I went and visited, but then it's kind of a big social scene there, and it seems like it's kind of homogenous. Whereas the diversity of Harvard appealed to me. Everyone was from such different backgrounds, there wasn't the cliquishness. And also my whole visit, people were interacting with me. They were engaging me, they were talking to me, they were interested in me, and I was interested in them. Now, Harvard's in Boston, and there's a big deaf community there, so even if I'm if I'm the only or one of the only deaf students at Harvard, I'm certainly not the only deaf person in Boston. So that, helped me narrow it down then at that point to Harvard and Wesleyan. So I asked for interpreting services for open house at both of those schools. And at Wesleyan, they said, well, we can't get an interpreter for the open house, and Harvard had plenty of interpreters. So I just felt like, okay, that's it. I don't have to fight for access. It was basically decided for me, and it also met my 3 criteria. There was deaf community, great academics, and the swim team was very fun. And it was Division I on top of it, so it was fine. The other aspect of that was that there are no athletic scholarships at Harvard, so I didn't have the pressure of my athletics paying for my school. So no pressure. So, of course, that was a really nice feature, just to swim for enjoyment. So, in the end, that's how I picked Harvard. Now, how I picked the University of Washington is another story. At that time, I had decided that I definitely wanted to major in biological oceanography, and there were 3 top schools for oceanography. University of Washington, Scripps Institute, which is part of the University of California at San Diego, and then the other school that I was interested in was Woods Hole, which is part of MIT. Understand, my bachelor's degree was in environmental science, not biology, so I had not taken all of the required biology classes for a degree in biology. Some programs require the biology GRE, and I hadn't taken all the courses that would prepare me for that. Of the 3 top schools, only Woods Hole required the biological GRE, so I eliminated that right away. So that left the other 2.
Oh, so the other 2 didn't require it?
No, not at all. Neither one. So I applied to both. I did not get into Scripps, but I did get into University of Washington, so I went there. There are a lot of other programs on the East Coast that I didn't go to, and let me just talk about that for a minute. On the West Coast, the schools of oceanography are generally right on the main campus. At the University of Washington, it's right on campus, and same at University of California. On the East Coast, however, the oceanography programs are usually at a distance from the main campus. So the oceanography school at University of Maryland, for instance, is about 2 hours away. So that has a great impact on the availability of interpreting services. If the oceanography lab is 2 hours away, how am I going to get interpreters that far away from the main campus? So that had a big impact on me. I knew I definitely wanted to be at a West Coast school where interpreters were going to be on the same campus where I needed them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I definitely looked for schools where the oceanography school was on the main campus. I knew that's what I needed.
Sure, that makes sense.
It's kind of like when I was looking for schools, what to apply to. I went to visit some of the schools, and I went in and I asked to go see somebody in the Office of Disability Services just to get a sense of what kind of services they have. And at one school, the first thing the director of Disability Services said to me was, "Do you know how expensive interpreters are?"
You're kidding.
No, is the very first question. So obviously, I don't want to go to that school. I would also often talk to students who were there at the school and ask what the services were like, and ask them if they thought it was a good idea to come there. One school that I really love is Brown. I mean, I'm a fan of Brown's. I love liberal arts. I love their approach. I love everything about Brown, practically. And I asked some of the students there, and they said, "I have to warn you about Brown. It's in Providence, Rhode Island, and most of the interpreters are in Boston. It's 2 hours away, and it's really hard to get interpreting services sometimes at Brown." My mom saw the whole conversation too, and it just ruled Brown out for me.
So, end of discussion.
Exactly. No interpreters, I can't go there. It's funny, while I was at Harvard, I several times thought, I could have gone to Brown, but it wouldn't have worked for me. So that is a key component in my decision making, was, do I have access to interpreter services? Because my point of view is, I have enough on my plate as a college student without worrying about fighting for access or fighting for interpreting services.
Absolutely.
And the interpreter coordinator at University of Washington was great. Like every Friday, we had these, basically kegger parties with the professors and the students, and they provided me an interpreter for even that. It was really nice. The thing was, after 3 years of RAIN, I decided it wasn't for me. So I decided to leave with my master's degree. I was in a PhD program, but I decided not to finish there. I just left with the master's because I wasn't happy. It meant that something needed to change.
It just wasn't worth continuing.
Right. So a change was needed of some kind. At that time, I was thinking about my options, like what was next for me. And really, at the end of my time at University of Washington, I was pretty down. I was thinking, maybe I'm not even meant to be a scientist. Maybe I should do something else altogether.
This is what you were thinking? Why?
Yeah, like maybe I should just leave sciences.
Because of the weather?
I hate to say it, but it really was the rain that got to me. Also, though, it was, I was at Harvard for 4 years in a very competitive environment. People from my cohort went on to UC Berkeley and places like that. These are very smart people, very capable people. And they kept up, they continued on in other competitive environments. But that competition for me, I just felt like I had had enough of it. And I was ready to learn for the sake of learning. And I was looking for a more relaxed environment at that point. I'd had enough years of the competition. For University of Washington, one of the requirements there was that you had to TA, be a teacher's assistant in classes. And my committee, I went to them and said, would it be possible for me to do my TA work at Gallaudet? And of course they said yes, because I'm deaf and it made sense for me to go to a deaf university and TA there. So they bought it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah, so I went for a quarter to Gallaudet. And at the same time, I talked with deaf professors there, and I loved it. I loved it. I wanted to be there. I wanted to stay there. At the same time, there had been a woman at the University of Maryland, and that woman had wanted me to go for my graduate studies there, but I was thinking at the time, I want to go. I've already been on the East Coast. I want to go somewhere different. That was too close to home for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to that woman with my tail between my legs and said, hey, what do you think about having me back? I would like to come back. And she was very happy to have me back. She said, sure. So I went back there as a student and finished my degree at the University of Maryland. It was really good for me because, I had, they offer a PhD there. It was nice. But then I had the deaf world at Gallaudet, and I was able to alternate between the two worlds. I had the intellectual stimulation of the University of Maryland and the satisfaction of the deaf world at Gallaudet. And it was funny because at Gallaudet I was a teacher, and at University of Maryland I was a student. So it was this kind of weird thing where I went back and forth between these two roles. But, it was good for me. I will say that the students at the University of Maryland are not of the same caliber as UW students. At University of Washington, they're doing cutting edge research, and at University of Maryland, people are saying things like, well, I'm finding some interesting things in the Chesapeake Bay. It's just not of the same caliber, but I felt good. It was local, yes, but it was relaxed and it felt good to me. The students were friendlier, they were low-key, it was just more pleasant. It was nice to have that kind of environment. It was a good environment to learn in. So I finished at University of Maryland, and that's my little journey through my education.
Wow.
Yeah, it truly was a journey.
And it still continues, right?
Absolutely.